Welcome back. I'm here for another video, hopefully a little bit shorter than my last one about gender. I'm here for another video on Independence Day by Sefi Atta. This time looking at the topic of protesting. Again, thinking about this from the point of view of our literary analysis essay, where we're trying to make an argument about the message the text is sending about one of these topics. For this one, yeah, protesting, you can check out the literary analysis assignment sheet and see the kind of questions that I put next to protesting or all the topics that we're going to do. So again, I just want to go through the story, look at some key moments, I think, for trying to find out the message about protesting. So we're thinking about what is the story saying about protesting? Does it work? Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? Does it not work? Kind of that stuff. So the first place that I want to go to, again, I would encourage you guys to follow along. The first place I would go to is the bottom of page 14 onto the top of page 15. So this is an important part, I think, for understanding the story's message about protesting. But it also sets up something that I gave you guys for homework. They mentioned here, so I'll just read the beginning of it and then I'll talk about it. So she says at the bottom of 14, yes, I heard about the Ogoni people, how they protested against Shell. Security forces came and shot at them, burned down their homes, beat up women and children. Ken Saro-Wiwa, and then going on to page 15, and others who led the movement were tried under a secret military tribunal and hanged in Port Harcourt. So that story, that what she's talking about there, is real history. You know, that stuff really happened with Shell, the real oil company, um, and all this stuff kind of happened in like the mid '90s, like '93 to '95. So really not all that long ago. Um, when you think about it, pretty recently, honestly, in the terms of world history and stuff. And what she's talking about here, so all this stuff about oil pollution and everything in Nigeria, this is 100% real, right? This is a fictional story, but those conditions are very real, and terrible. And Ken Saro-Wiwa was part of one of the leaders of like a protest movement that was like an environmentalist kind of thing, where it's like Madam Queen in the story. It's what they're talking about, that the oil companies were ruining the land, we're having oil spills, we're letting like animals were dying. There's acid rain, the roads and things are being ruined, um, and yeah, so Ken Saro-Wiwa was one of the leaders of the protest movement, kind of against this, to force them to clean up more and to not have these spills, and also to like make them like pay something back to the people of the country for like everything that had gone wrong. And just like it says here, basically they were met with violence. There was, she calls them security forces in this, but there is even the Nigerian military and other just armed militia type things, uh, responded with violence, even though it was largely a peaceful protest kind of movement, especially from the leadership. They responded, with terrible violence, and he describes some of it in this paragraph. I'll read some of it. But yeah, so then Ken Saro-Wiwa and some of the other leaders of this movement were basically tried in like not a real trial, kind of a show trial situation, and it was voted on by the military leaders, decided their fate, and they were all executed basically for political reasons. So that's one of the things that I gave you for homework. It was called a final statement by Ken Saro-Wiwa, and that is a speech that he gives before being executed, once he knows what the verdict is, and kind of what he says. So you'll take a look at that and we'll read that. I think I also gave you that podcast that goes through some of the history of this and tells you some of the specifics as well. Okay, but I want to read on a little bit. So this is just Eve like describing more stuff about protests. Okay, so kind of in the middle of the paragraph at the top of 15. It said students from Val's universities marched to the governor's house and threw petrol bombs through the windows. Kill and go police came and opened fire on them. 8 were struck, 5 killed. One had a bullet through his head. Skipping down a little bit. The villagers refused to accept the mass grave Summit Oil offered. They blocked access to the flow station in protest. Summit Oil called in soldiers. The soldiers threw tear gas, butted their heads with rifles, kicked a pregnant woman in her belly until she miscarried, beat up an old man until he was comatose. It goes on, and then she ends the paragraph. I've never demonstrated in my life. Why would I? So what's the message about protesting there? What is it showing us about protesting there? Number one, that it's like super dangerous, especially in this context. But in a lot of contexts, but the specifics of the government response to protests in Nigeria was, yeah, just brutal and deadly the way that Eve describes there. So I think that's the first kind of message is like, well, it's super dangerous. But there's other things we can look at. Okay, well, so actually another kind of like negative response to protesting is something I talked about in the video on gender a little bit, but it has to do with Madam Queen, right? Obviously, if we're talking about protesting, we have to be focusing on Madam Queen since she's the real representative. Eve's never protested, right? Like we just saw, Madam Queen definitely has. Let me see, what page is this? Okay, here it is. It's at the bottom of 13. So I just want to read some of Madam Queen's speech here again, just as part of like the context for these protests and what she's protesting and stuff. So kind of in the middle of page 13, she says the oil companies, they drill our fathers' farms and they don't give we their children jobs. We eat okra, cassava grown in other parts of the country. We use their yam, plantain, and palm oil to cook our onunu. There are no fish in our rivers, no bush rats left in our forest. We can't use natural gas in our homes, and yet we have gas flares in our backyards. We can't find kerosene to buy, but we have pipelines running through our land. Some of us don't have electricity. Some of us don't even have candles to burn. She goes on kind of in the middle of the next paragraph. All of this is good. You should definitely reread all of her kind of protest speech. Just definitely if this is something you want to write about. She says, we protest because they continue to breach regulations and they call security forces to handle us. Women, listen to me. I'm telling you this. As we speak, we are dying. We are dying of our air. We are dying of our water. We are dying from oil. We are not benefiting from it. Must we continue to stand by in silence and wait for men to fight our battles? So yeah, there you go. Just in terms of what they're protesting, and Madam Queen as a leader of this, and kind of what she's fighting for and stuff. So I want to go back to the kind of reaction that she gets though, because some people in town listen to her, but then we talked about this in the video on gender, like Eve's parents' reaction and Eve's mom's reaction specifically, saying that's why she can't keep a man. She's trying to get people killed. Remember what happened to the Ogoni people. Um, so yeah, so again, we just see like what happens to people who protest, like not just like the physical danger that Eve and the violence that Eve was describing, but also the kind of social ramifications. That like anyone who's like protesting, it's like they will always get blamed as being the ones making an issue, or like, oh, is this really necessary, or do you have to do this now? Like the whole thing of protesting is like making people uncomfortable and creating tension and stuff, basically trying to force them to do something about whatever issue you're protesting for. So there's always going to be that kind of response. I think we know this like from real life, but we see it here with Madam Queen too. The way that she's like ostracized by certain people in the community because of her outspokenness and her preaching and giving speeches against and trying to organize people as well, which obviously by the end of the story we see that she does actually organize everyone. And something that I was just thinking about when I was reading that is that she ends it, must we continue to stand by in silence and wait for men to fight our battles. We talked about silence in the gender video as Eve's talking about women being fluent in silence, and so Madam Queen's tapping into the same thing here, the kind of like, are we going to continue to be silent? And then she says, and wait for men to fight our battles. So she also sees this as like specifically a women's movement, and that's what we see at the end of the story, which is where we're going to go now, where the protest that Madam Queen leads is all the women from the town specifically. It's only women. So that there's that kind of gender aspect to what she's doing. So I just want to read through on page 17 right at the end. So far, what have we seen about protesting? We've seen it be shown as dangerous. We've seen like the kind of social ramifications and stuff. We've also seen that Madam Queen is doing it for a good reason. So we've seen that. And now I want to go to the ending to kind of think about what the message is here. So starting kind of towards, 3/4 of the way through page 17, the last page. This is Mrs. Arago talking. She says, aren't these the demonstrators from your hometown? Going on. Eve says, I recognize Madam Queen, Angelina's mother, Angelina, and Mama. I shout, her beautiful, troublesome face. What is she doing there? Your mother is one of them, Mrs. Dorego asks. I nod. Eman's mother is there, Val's mother, and his older sister. Mrs. Dorego hugs me. They've brought Summit Oil's operation to a standstill. Can you imagine? Can you? The company is negotiating with them. See? The women are dressed in traditional attire, lace blouses, plaid wrappers, and head ties. Blah, blah, blah. She says, she's hugging Mrs. Dorego. She says, why am I afraid? We hold each other for a while, and then I pull back and affirm the union of women. And then it ends, I have something to tell you, but you may not want to hear it. Eve, she says, welcome to me banning my children. So it's interesting there. I believe that's a moment too where we see Eve and Mrs. Dorego kind of come together and like be on the same side. Where when we talked about the motivations of the characters, Eve and Mrs. Dorego are kind of like pitted against each other in a way because, like we said, for Mrs. Dorego to become a doctor, she needs Eve to stay with the kids. For Eve to be a nurse, she has to leave and not stay with the kids. So they've kind of been at odds in a lot of ways. But here, yeah, they hug. They're like so happy about this. The protest seems to have been successful in some kind of way, and then she, affirms the union of women. But then we know it's not going to last, right? That kind of togetherness with the two of them, because then the next thing that happens is Eve is going to tell Mrs. Dorego that she's going to leave. So thinking about protesting here, it seems like their protest has been successful as far as it goes. That the company's negotiating, they shut down the company, right? Most protests, in that kind of like occupying a place sort of protest, like what they were doing. That's kind of the goal, is to like shut it down and make them have to talk to you. And it seems like they've been successful doing that. So if we look at it that way, now we kind of do get the positive message about protesting, where like it can be useful, it can like work or whatever. But like I was saying in the last video about gender, with this ending, we don't ultimately know if Madam Queen, like she's in the short term, in that one protest, she's gotten what she wanted in that she shut down the oil factory, whatever, the oil refinery, whatever you call it, and she's made them negotiate with her, so she's been successful in that way. But is she going to be successful in the long term in terms of getting them to not pollute so much, or give something back to the people, or whatever, pave the roads that have been ruined, or do something about all the fish that have died in the rivers and stuff like that? I don't know. Is that too pessimistic to just say no? I don't know. Maybe she gets something out of them. But so, what's the message here ultimately? That I don't know, but it does end on this high note. So it's hard for me to say that the message is that protesting is not worth it or not good to do when it ends on this high note of a protest having some effect. So I don't know. Maybe it's like dangerous. It's people might turn on you for it, like with Madam Queen, the treatment that she gets. But ultimately, it's worth it, or ultimately it can work, or ultimately it can kind of work, but you're not going to get everything you want. I don't know. I don't know exactly what we would say the message is. Again, this is why we have to be like nuanced about this stuff and think it through all the way. But I feel like ultimately it shows protesting as being worth it, just because of the fact that it is successful right there. I think it also like kind of inspires Eve to finally leave and to get her own independence. So I think we're supposed to see it as a positive kind of thing in Eve, something that inspires her. Because at the beginning of the story, the very first thing she says is that today is not a good day to tell her, talking about it's a bad day to tell Mrs. Dorego that she's going to leave to try to become a nurse on her own. And at the end here, like I don't think she was planning on telling Mrs. Dorego this, but then they go through this thing where, she sees the protest being successful in Nigeria, and then she says, "I have something to tell you, but you may not want to hear it." So it also seems like kind of a positive thing that like inspires Eve. So it's a good thing, maybe, even if they don't ultimately get the oil companies to like clean everything up or whatever. So yeah, protesting. I think the message is, again, kind of a middle ground sort of thing, but that's up to you guys to figure out exactly how you want to put it, if you want to make this argument. Those are some places that I would look at. And obviously we kind of had some outside sources already. I'm going to do a video coming up talking about research and using sources. But for this one, I think the thing I gave you for homework, the two things, are both kind of relevant to this topic of protesting. Okay, that's it for now. See you soon.